Blood-soaked footprints trailed behind Katherine Foster as she stumbled across the merciless Arizona desert. Her once white dress now stained with dirt and sweat. Her lips cracked from thirst. 5 days had passed since she'd fled the stagecoach attack that had left her fellow passengers dead. 5 days of scorching sun and freezing nights with nothing but the stars to guide her toward a horizon that never seemed to draw closer. The summer of 1878 had begun like any other for Katherine. The 24-year-old schoolteacher from Boston had accepted a position in Prescott, Arizona Territory, lured by promises of adventure and independence. Now, as she collapsed onto the burning sand for what felt like the 100th time that day, she wondered if her ambition would be the death of her. "Just a little farther," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Her feet were raw and blistered, leaving crimson stains on the desert floor with each painful step. The small canteen she'd managed to grab during her escape had emptied 2 days ago, and the relentless sun beat down on her fair skin without mercy. Katherine closed her eyes just for a moment, just to gather her strength. The distant whinny of a horse barely registered in her exhausted mind. It wasn't until the sound of hoofbeats grew louder that she forced her eyes open, wondering if she was hallucinating. A figure on horseback approached through the heat haze, silhouetted against the setting sun. Katherine tried to call out, but her parched throat produced only a raspy moan as darkness claimed her. When consciousness returned, the first thing Katherine noticed was shade. Blessed, cool shade. Something damp touched her lips, a cloth, moistened with water. She drank greedily when a canteen was offered. "Easy now," said a deep voice. "Too much at once and you'll make yourself sick." Katherine's vision cleared to reveal a man kneeling beside her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and a week's worth of beard shadowed his jaw. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, faded denims, a cotton shirt rolled up at the sleeves, and a dust-covered hat that lay on the ground beside him. "Where am I?" Katherine managed, her voice a painful rasp. "My camp. About 30 miles northeast of Ordway." He offered the canteen again. "I'm Blake Quinn. Most folks just call me Quinn." Katherine took another careful sip. "Katherine Foster. I was on the Prescott stage when we were attacked by bandits. I managed to escape during the chaos, but I've been walking ever since." Quinn's expression darkened. "The Carson gang. They've been terrorizing this route for months. Law can't catch them." He looked down at her feet, which he'd wrapped in strips of clean cloth. "You walked across the desert barefoot for days. That's either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever heard." Despite her condition, Katherine felt a flash of indignation. "I didn't have much choice in the matter, Mr. Quinn." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, I reckon you didn't." He stood, moving to tend the small fire where coffee was brewing in a battered pot. "You're lucky I found you." "Another day out there and—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. "Thank you," Katherine said quietly, "for saving my life." Quinn shrugged as if rescuing half-dead women from the desert was something he did every day. "Can you eat something? I've got beans and some jerky." Katherine nodded, suddenly aware of the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. As Quinn prepared a plate for her, she took in her surroundings. They were in a small canyon, sheltered by towering red rocks. A paint horse grazed nearby, and Quinn's sparse belongings were neatly arranged around the campsite. "What brings you out here alone?" Katherine asked as he handed her a plate of beans. Quinn settled across from her, his plate balanced on his knee. "I'm tracking strays. I work for the Diamond Bar Ranch near Ordway. Owner sends me out regular to find cattle that wander off." Katherine ate slowly, savoring each bite. "And Ordway, is it a large town?" "Not particularly. but decent enough. Got a general store, hotel, couple saloons. Even got a schoolhouse, though no teacher at present. Catherine's interest peaked. No teacher. Last one left 3 months ago. Couldn't handle frontier life. Quinn studied her face. You mentioned you're a teacher. Yes. I was headed to Prescott to take a position there. Quinn nodded thoughtfully. Well, once you're healed up, I can take you to Prescott if that's still where you want to go, or... He hesitated. Ordway could use someone like you. Katherine considered this as she finished her meal. Prescott would be waiting for her, but after the ordeal she'd survived, the thought of a smaller, closer town held appeal. I'll think about it, she said finally. Quinn took her empty plate. Your feet need at least a few days' rest before you go anywhere. We'll stay here tomorrow, then make for Ordway the day after if you're able. That night, Katherine slept on Quinn's bedroll while he sat keeping watch, his rifle across his knees. Despite the pain in her feet and the lingering fear from her ordeal, she felt safe for the first time since the stagecoach attack. The next morning, Katherine awoke to find Quinn already up and tending to his horse. The sun was just beginning to peek over the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Morning, Quinn said, approaching with a cup of coffee. How are the feet? Katherine tentatively flexed her toes and winced. Still quite painful, but better than yesterday. Quinn nodded and knelt to examine her bandaged feet. His hands were calloused but gentle as he removed the strips of cloth. Katherine bit her lip at the sight of her raw, blistered soles. They're starting to heal, Quinn said, reaching for his canteen to clean the wounds. But you won't be walking any distance for a while. As he worked, Katherine studied him more carefully in the morning light. Beneath the trail dust and weathered exterior, Quinn was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30. There was a quietness about him that suggested depth, a man comfortable with solitude but not defined by it. How long have you been a cowboy, Mr. Quinn? She asked. Since I was 16, and just Quinn is fine. He applied a salve to her feet that smelled of pine and herbs. My pa worked cattle in Texas. I grew up in the saddle. And your family, a shadow crossed his face, lost pa to Apache raiders in '69. Ma passed 2 years later, no siblings. I'm sorry, Katherine said softly. Quinn shrugged. Life out here is hard. You adapt or you don't survive. He wrapped fresh bandages around her feet. What about you? Family waiting back east? Katherine shook her head. My parents died of influenza when I was 18. I stayed in Boston, teaching at a girls' school, but I've always dreamed of seeing the West. Well, you've certainly seen some of the worst it has to offer. Quinn stood and offered her more coffee. Might help you decide if it's worth staying for the best parts. They spent the day in the shade of the canyon. Quinn left briefly to check his traps and returned with 2 rabbits for their dinner. As he prepared the meal, Katherine found herself watching his methodical movements, the ease with which he navigated this harsh landscape. How do you know what plants to use for medicine? She asked, gesturing to her bandaged feet. Quinn glanced up from the fire. Learned from a Navajo man who worked at the ranch when I first came to Arizona. Old fellow named Hostine. Taught me which plants heal, which are poison, how to find water where there seems to be none. It's remarkable knowledge. It's survival. Quinn turned the rabbits on the spit. Out here, book learning isn't worth much if you don't know how to stay alive. Katherine bristled slightly. I believe all knowledge has value, Mr. Quinn. His eyes met hers, a hint of amusement in their gray depths. I didn't say it didn't, just that priorities shift when you're facing the desert with no water. He paused. That said, I've always wished I had more schooling, never got past basic reading and figures. This admission surprised Katherine. You seem quite intelligent. Intelligence and education aren't the same thing, Miss Foster. He served the rabbit, which was surprisingly tender. "I expect you know that, being a teacher." As they ate, the conversation turned to Ordway. Quinn described the small frontier town nestled in a valley between mountain ranges, with the clear waters of the San Pedro River running along its eastern edge. "It's growing," he explained. "The railroad's talking about putting in a stop there next year. Cattle business is good, and there's talk of copper in the hills. Town's got respectable families now, not just miners and cowboys. And they truly need a teacher," Quinn nodded. "Children are either learning from their parents or not at all. Mayor's been writing to schools back east, but no one's come yet. It's not a glamorous posting like Prescott or Tucson." Katherine considered this. Her position in Prescott would still be waiting, but the thought of helping build something from the ground up appealed to her pioneer spirit. "I might consider it, at least temporarily." Quinn's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. It would be the town's gain. The next morning, Katherine awoke to find a surprise beside her bedroll: a pair of boots. They were clearly men's boots, worn but sturdy, much too large for her feet. "They're Hostein's old boots," Quinn explained when he saw her examining them. "He left them behind when he returned to his people. Thought we could stuff them with cloth to make them fit well enough for riding. Can't have you arriving in Ordway barefoot." Katherine felt unexpected emotion well up at this simple kindness. "Thank you. I'll find a way to repay you." Quinn shook his head. "No need. Just doing what anyone would." "We both know that's not true," Katherine said softly. Quinn seemed uncomfortable with her gratitude and busied himself breaking camp. Within the hour, they were ready to depart. Quinn padded the boots with spare cloth, and though they were comically large on Katherine's feet, they protected her wounds from further harm. With Katherine's dress in tatters, Quinn offered her one of his spare shirts to wear over it for modesty and protection from the sun. The arrangement was far from proper, but propriety seemed a distant concern after all she'd endured. Quinn helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. Katherine tensed at the improper closeness, but she had no choice but to lean back against his solid chest as they set off toward Ordway. "It's about a day's ride," Quinn explained. "We'll stop at midday to rest the horse." As they rode, the landscape gradually changed from harsh desert to rolling grasslands dotted with mesquite and juniper. Quinn pointed out landmarks and wildlife, occasionally sharing stories of his experiences in the territory. Katherine found herself relaxing despite the pain in her feet and the impropriety of their arrangement. At midday, they stopped beside a small spring. Quinn helped Katherine down and set about preparing a cold meal of jerky and hardtack. As they ate, Katherine noticed him watching her with an unreadable expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Quinn shook his head. "Just wondering what a Boston schoolteacher is going to make of a place like Ordway." Katherine smiled. "Probably the same thing I'd make of any new place and opportunity to learn and teach." She took a sip of water. "I'm not as delicate as I might appear, Mr. Quinn. After what you've survived, I wouldn't dare suggest it." His voice held genuine respect. "Still, frontier towns can be rough. People work hard, play harder. Not all of it's fit for a lady's eyes." "I suppose I'll adapt," Katherine said, echoing his words from earlier, "or I won't survive." This drew a rare smile from Quinn, transforming his weathered face. "Fair enough, Miss Foster." They continued their journey through the afternoon, the sun beating down mercilessly. Katherine found herself drifting in and out of a light doze, lulled by the rhythmic movement of the horse and the solid presence of Quinn behind her. As the sun began to set, the silhouette of Ordway appeared on the horizon. It was smaller than Katherine had imagined, a cluster of buildings along a wide dirt street, with scattered homesteads visible in the distance. Even from afar, she could see the activity. Wagons moving along the road, livestock in pens, smoke rising from chimneys. "Not much to look at," Quinn said, "but it's home." They rode into town as dusk was falling. Katherine was acutely aware of the curious stares from townspeople as they passed. A woman in a tattered dress, wearing men's boots and a cowboy's shirt, riding double with the taciturn Quinn from the Diamond Bar, was clearly the most interesting thing to happen in Ordway in some time. Quinn guided the horse directly to a two-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Ordway Hotel. He dismounted first, then carefully helped Katherine down, mindful of her injured feet. "Mrs. Peterson runs the hotel," Quinn explained. "She's a good woman. She'll help get you sorted with clothes and such." The hotel door opened and a plump, gray-haired woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Katherine. "Good heavens, Quinn! Who's this poor creature?" "Mrs. Peterson, this is Miss Katherine Foster. She survived the Carson gang's attack on the Prescott stage. Been walking through the desert for days before I found her." Mrs. Peterson's face filled with sympathy. "You poor dear, come in right away. We'll get you a hot bath and proper clothes." She looked at Quinn. "You did right bringing her here." As Mrs. Peterson ushered her toward the door, Katherine turned back to Quinn. "Thank you for everything." Quinn touched the brim of his hat. "I'll check on you tomorrow, see how you're getting on." Inside the hotel, Mrs. Peterson proved to be a whirlwind of efficient compassion. Within the hour, Katherine found herself soaking in a copper tub of hot water, her cuts and blisters treated with proper medicine, and a nightgown and robe laid out for her use. "Quinn said you're a teacher," Mrs. Peterson asked as she helped Katherine wash her matted hair. "Yes, I was headed to Prescott for a position there." Mrs. Peterson's face lit up. "Oh my, we've been praying for a teacher here in Ordway for months. The mayor will want to speak with you right away." Katherine smiled tiredly. "I'd be happy to discuss it, though I haven't made any decisions yet." "Of course, dear. You need rest first, but it would be such a blessing to have you stay." That night, in a real bed with clean sheets, Katherine lay awake thinking about the unexpected turn her life had taken. She had left Boston seeking adventure and independence, never imagining the form it would take. The sensible thing would be to continue to Prescott once she recovered, where a secure position and civilized society awaited. Yet something about Ordway called to her. Perhaps it was the opportunity to build something meaningful in a place that truly needed her. Or perhaps, she admitted to herself as sleep finally claimed her, it was the memory of storm-gray eyes and the most reliable hands she had ever known. The next morning, Katherine woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was back in Boston. Then the pain in her feet reminded her of everything that had happened. A knock at the door preceded Mrs. Peterson's cheerful entrance with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, dear. I've brought you some eggs and biscuits, and there's coffee too." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. You're very kind." "It's nothing, dear. Oh, and Quinn left these for you." She placed a package on the bed. "Said they belonged to his sister, though I didn't know he had one." After Mrs. Peterson left, Katherine unwrapped the package to find a pair of women's boots, simple but well-made, brown leather with modest heels. A note was tucked inside. "These might fit better than Hostein's. They belong to my wife, Rebecca. She passed 3 years ago. She would have wanted you to have them." Katherine stared at the note, a strange feeling settling in her chest. Quinn had been married. The boots were a precious keepsake, yet he had given them to her, a stranger. The generosity of the gesture moved her deeply. Later that morning, dressed in a borrowed dress from Mrs. Peterson's niece and wearing Rebecca's boots, which fit perfectly, Katherine made her way downstairs. Her feet still hurt, but the doctor who had visited earlier had pronounced her on the mend. The hotel's small dining room was empty except for Mayor Harold Simmons, a portly man with impressive mutton chops, who stood when she entered. "Miss Foster, I'm delighted to meet you. Mrs. Peterson told me of your ordeal and your background in education." Katherine smiled politely as she took a seat. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mayor Simmons." For the next hour, the mayor enthusiastically outlined Ordway's need for a teacher. The town had built a small schoolhouse the previous year, but had been unable to retain a teacher for more than a few months at a time. "We have 28 children of school age," he explained, "from 6 to 16 years. Most have had spotty education at best. The position pays $30 a month, plus room and board. We have a small cottage behind the schoolhouse specifically for the teacher." It was a modest salary, less than she would have received in Prescott, but the provision of housing made it comparable. "When would you need me to start?" Katherine asked. The mayor beamed. "As soon as you're well enough. We could have the schoolhouse ready by next Monday if that suits." Katherine hesitated. "I should tell you, Mayor Simmons, that I had committed to a position in Prescott. I would need to write to them explaining the situation." Of course. But you'll consider our offer." "I will," Katherine promised. "I'll give you my answer by tomorrow." After the mayor left, Katherine borrowed paper and pen from Mrs. Peterson and wrote to the school board in Prescott, explaining her circumstances and apologizing for any inconvenience her change of plans might cause. As she was sealing the letter, Mrs. Peterson entered with news that Quinn was waiting to see her. Katherine found him in the hotel's small sitting room, hat in hand. He looked different, cleaner, his hair tied back, his clothes less trail-worn. He stood when she entered. "Miss Foster, you look well." "Thanks to you, Mr. Quinn." She gestured to her feet. "And thank you for the boots." "They fit perfectly," Quinn nodded, his expression unreadable. "Rebecca was about your size." "I'm sorry for your loss," Katherine said gently. "Mrs. Peterson didn't realize you'd been married. I don't talk about it much." He shifted uncomfortably. "Consumption took her. Nothing to be done." Katherine sensed his discomfort and changed the subject. "I've just been speaking with Mayor Simmons about the teaching position." Interest sparked in Quinn's eyes. "And I'm considering it. I'll need to inform Prescott, of course." "Of course." Quinn seemed to be struggling with something. Finally, he said, "I thought you might like to see the town if you're feeling up to it. Get a better sense of the place before you decide." Katherine smiled. "I'd like that very much." They walked slowly through Ordway, mindful of Katherine's healing feet. The town was indeed small, one main street with several cross streets, lined with wooden buildings in various states of repair. Quinn pointed out the essential businesses: the general store, the blacksmith, 2 saloons, one respectable, one less so, the small church, the doctor's office, and finally the schoolhouse. It was a simple building with a bell tower, freshly painted white. Behind it stood a small cottage surrounded by a picket fence. "It's not much," Quinn said as they stood outside the fence, "but it's solid. Built it myself, along with some other men from the ranch." Katherine looked at him in surprise. "You helped build the school?" Quinn nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "Rebecca was educated. She always talked about the importance of learning. After she died, helping build the school seemed like something she would have wanted." Katherine felt a new understanding of this quiet man forming. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was." Quinn's voice was soft with memory. Then, more briskly, "Let's see the inside." The schoolhouse was simple but well constructed, with rows of rough-hewn desks facing a teacher's desk on a small platform. Bookshelves lined one wall, though they held only a few worn volumes. "Books are hard to come by," Quinn explained. but the mayor's written to publishers back east, and every family contributes what they can. The cottage behind the school was equally simple, 2 rooms plus a small kitchen, with basic furniture and a tiny garden plot out back. It was humble but clean, and Katherine could see herself making a home there. As they left the schoolhouse, Quinn pointed to a hill overlooking the town. "The ranch is just beyond that rise. Diamond Bar's the biggest outfit around here." "You live at the ranch?" Katherine asked. "Got a small cabin on the property. Owner, Mr. Patterson, is a fair man, gives his men decent quarters." They continued their tour, ending at the general store where Quinn introduced Katherine to the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, and his wife. The couple welcomed her warmly, clearly delighted at the prospect of a permanent teacher for the town. By the time they returned to the hotel, Katherine had met dozens of townspeople, all of whom had treated her with genuine kindness and excitement at the possibility she might stay. She was struck by the sense of community, so different from the anonymous existence she'd led in Boston. "Thank you for showing me around," Katherine said as they stood outside the hotel. "It's helped me get a better sense of Ordway." Quinn studied her face. "And will you stay?" Katherine found herself wanting to say yes simply to see approval in those storm-gray eyes. "I'm leaning toward it." "But I should sleep on such an important decision." Quinn nodded. "Sensible." He hesitated, then added, "I ride back out tomorrow for a few days, ranch business." "Oh," Katherine was surprised by her disappointment. "Well, thank you again for everything, Mr. Quinn." "Blake," he said suddenly. "My given name is Blake," Katherine smiled. "Thank you, Blake." He touched his hat brim and turned to go, then paused. "Mayor's organizing a town social Saturday next, to welcome you if you stay, or to bid you farewell if you don't." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I'll be back by then." With that, he was gone, leaving Katherine to wonder why the prospect of seeing Blake Quinn again in a week's time should make her pulse quicken like a schoolgirl's. The next day, Katherine gave Mayor Simmons her answer. She would stay in Ordway, at least for the remainder of the school year. The news spread quickly through the small town, and throughout the day, women arrived at the hotel with offerings: home-cooked meals, jars of preserves, a quilt for her bed at the cottage. By Friday, Katherine's feet had healed enough for her to move into the teacher's cottage. The women of Ordway helped her settle in, bringing small items to make the place homier: curtains for the windows, a rag rug for the floor, even a cat to keep mice at bay. Katherine found herself touched by their generosity. In Boston, she had lived among people for years without knowing their names. Here, within days, she was being treated like family. On Monday, Katherine opened the schoolhouse for the first time. 28 children of varying ages filed in, their faces a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and in some cases, skepticism. They ranged from the youngest, 6-year-old Sarah Jenkins with her golden curls, to 16-year-old Thomas Miller, already working at his father's blacksmith shop and attending school only reluctantly. "Good morning," Katherine said, smiling at her new pupils. "My name is Miss Foster, and I'm very happy to be your teacher." The first week was challenging as Katherine assessed each child's knowledge and abilities. Some could barely recognize letters. Others, like Thomas Miller's 14-year-old sister Emma, showed remarkable aptitude despite gaps in their education. Katherine organized them into groups based on ability rather than age, developing lessons that would allow each child to progress at their own pace. Throughout the week, Katherine found her thoughts often drifting to Blake Quinn. She wondered where he was, what ranch business had taken him away, when exactly he would return. She told herself her interest was merely gratitude for his rescue, combined with curiosity about this taciturn man who had helped build a schoolhouse in memory of his wife. Saturday dawned clear and mild. The town's social was to be held in the churchyard that evening, and Katherine spent the morning helping Mrs. Peterson and other women prepare food and decorations. As they worked, the conversation turned to Blake Quinn. "Such a shame about his Rebecca," Mrs. Peterson said as she crimped the edges of a pie. "They were only married 2 years when she fell ill." "He doesn't seem the type to marry," Katherine observed, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Jenkins laughed. "Oh, he wasn't always so serious." Before Rebecca died, Quinn was different, smiled more, came to socials, even played fiddle sometimes. "He plays the fiddle," Katherine couldn't hide her surprise. "Beautifully," Mrs. Peterson confirmed, "but not since she passed. 3 years now, and he's kept to himself mostly. Works hard, helps out when needed, but keeps his distance." Katherine absorbed this information, her image of Blake Quinn shifting and expanding. She wondered if she would see that other side of him, the man who smiled and played fiddle, or if that part had died with his wife. As evening approached, Katherine dressed in her finest clothes, a blue dress that Mrs. Peterson's niece had altered to fit her, with Rebecca's boots polished to a shine. She had just finished pinning up her hair when a knock came at the cottage door. Blake Quinn stood on her doorstep, clean-shaven and wearing what appeared to be his Sunday best, dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hat was in his hands and his dark hair was neatly combed. "Good evening, Miss Foster. I thought you might like an escort to the social." His voice was as measured as ever, but there was something in his eyes, a nervousness perhaps, that Katherine found endearing. "I would like that very much, Mr. Quinn." "Blake," he reminded her. Katherine smiled. "Blake. And you must call me Katherine." The social was held in the churchyard, with tables arranged in a square and lanterns hanging from ropes strung between trees. Nearly everyone in town had turned out, dressed in their finest clothes. A small group of musicians played lively tunes, and children darted between the adults, playing games in the fading light. As they approached, Mayor Simmons spotted them and hurried over. "Miss Foster and Quinn, good to see you back. Come, everyone wants to properly welcome our new teacher." The evening passed in a whirl of introductions and conversations. Katherine found herself warmly received by all, from the wealthiest rancher to the humblest mine worker. Throughout it all, Blake remained nearby, not hovering but present, occasionally bringing her lemonade or introducing her to someone she hadn't yet met. As darkness fell, and the lanterns cast a golden glow over the gathering, the music slowed to a waltz. Couples moved onto the makeshift dance floor, and Katherine found herself standing beside Blake, watching. "You dance, Blake?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Used to, been a while." Katherine smiled encouragingly. Perhaps it's time to try again. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, he offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Katherine?" His hand was warm and solid as he led her to the dance floor. When he placed his other hand at her waist, Katherine felt a fluttering sensation in her stomach that had nothing to do with nervousness about dancing. Blake moved with unexpected grace for a man who spent his days on horseback. He guided her smoothly around the dance floor, keeping a proper distance between them, but holding her gaze with an intensity that made Katherine's cheeks warm. "You dance very well," she said, trying to break the charged silence between them. "Had a good teacher." A shadow crossed his face, and Katherine knew he was thinking of Rebecca. "Tell me about her," Katherine said softly, "if you'd like to." Blake was quiet for so long that Katherine thought he wouldn't answer. Then, as they turned with the music, he began to speak. "She was from Santa Fe. Educated at a convent school. I met her when I was delivering horses to her father's ranch." A small smile touched his lips. She wasn't impressed with me at first, said I was too rough around the edges, but I wore her down. I can imagine, Katherine said, returning his smile. We had 2 good years, then the cough started. His voice tightened, tried everything, took her to doctors in Tucson, even Denver, nothing helped. He fell silent again, then added softly, she loved books, always reading, said she wanted to teach someday. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. That's why you helped build the school. Blake nodded. Seemed right. The music ended, but they remained standing close, his hand still at her waist. Around them, couples were leaving the dance floor, but neither moved. Thank you for telling me, Katherine said. Blake's eyes searched hers. Haven't talked about her in a long time. Feels different now. Before Katherine could respond, Mayor Simmons called for everyone's attention, announcing that refreshments were being served. The moment broken, Blake stepped back, though he offered Katherine his arm as they walked to the tables laden with food. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with more dancing, good food, and conversation. Katherine found herself repeatedly seeking out Blake's company, and he seemed equally drawn to her. By the time he escorted her home, the stars were bright overhead and most of the town had retired for the night. At her door, Katherine turned to face him. Thank you for a lovely evening. Blake stood with his hat in his hands, his face half in shadow. Thank you for the dance. He hesitated, then added, would you allow me to call on you, properly I mean? Katherine's heart quickened. I would like that very much. He nodded, a smile briefly illuminating his features. Good night then, Katherine. Good night, Blake. In the weeks that followed, Blake called on Katherine regularly. On Sundays after church, he would escort her on walks around town. Sometimes they would ride together, Blake having borrowed a gentle mare from the ranch for Katherine's use. He taught her about the land, the names of plants and animals, how to read the weather in the clouds, the history of the territory. For her part, Katherine shared books with him, poetry and novels she had brought from Boston. She was delighted to discover that, while his formal education was limited, Blake had a quick mind and genuine curiosity. Sometimes she would read aloud while they sat by the river, his head tilted back against a tree, eyes closed as he absorbed the words. October arrived with cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets. Katherine's school was thriving, with even the most reluctant students showing improvement. She had started evening classes for adults as well, teaching basic literacy and arithmetic 3 nights a week. To her surprise, Blake was among her most dedicated adult pupils. Never had much chance for learning as a boy, he explained when she asked why a man who could already read and figure would attend. Always wanted to know more. Katherine suspected there was another reason, that he simply wanted to spend time with her, but she didn't press. Their friendship was deepening into something more, but slowly, cautiously. Blake was still reticent about his feelings, and Katherine understood he was still healing from his loss. One crisp Saturday in late October, Blake invited Katherine to ride with him to a special place in the hills. They set out early, with a picnic lunch packed by Mrs. Peterson. Katherine had become a competent rider under Blake's tutelage, and she enjoyed the freedom of moving through the landscape on horseback. After an hour's ride, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. The view was breathtaking. The town of Ordway looked like a child's toy set from this height, surrounded by the vast expanse of desert and mountains. It's beautiful, Katherine breathed. Blake helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Found this place my first month in the territory. Come here sometimes to think. They spread a blanket beneath a juniper tree and unpacked their lunch. As they ate, Blake seemed preoccupied, his gaze frequently drifting to the horizon. Is something troubling you? Katherine finally asked. Blake set down his coffee cup. Got news yesterday. Patterson's selling the Diamond Bar. Catherine's heart sank. Will you stay on under the new owner? Don't know yet. Depends who buys it. He looked at her directly. But I've been thinking about making a change anyway. What kind of change? Blake took a deep breath. I've saved enough to buy a small spread. Nothing fancy, just 100 acres with good water south of town. Patterson's willing to sell it to me as a separate parcel before the main ranch goes. Katherine felt a mixture of relief and excitement. Your own ranch. Blake, that's wonderful. It would be hard work. Starting small, building up slowly. He hesitated. And I'd be doing it alone unless. Catherine's heart began to race as Blake reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. He held it out to her, a simple gold band with a small pearl. This was my mother's, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been carrying it since the day I found you in the desert. Knew then that something had changed for me. He met her eyes. I love you, Katherine. Will you marry me? Tears sprang to Catherine's eyes. Oh, Blake. His face fell. It's too soon. I understand if no, Katherine interrupted, reaching for his hand. I mean yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Blake's expression transformed, years of sorrow lifting as he smiled, a full, genuine smile that took Catherine's breath away. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. When they finally broke apart, Blake rested his forehead against hers. You sure? Life with me won't be easy. That little spread will take years to build into something. Katherine smiled, cupping his face in her hands. I walked barefoot through the desert for days, Blake Quinn. I think I can handle a little hard work. She kissed him again. Besides, you gave me boots, and now you've given me a reason to stay. They were married 2 weeks later in the Ordway church, with the entire town in attendance. Mayor Simmons proudly gave the bride away, and Mrs. Peterson wept openly throughout the ceremony. Blake had already begun work on their home, a small but sturdy cabin on their new land, which they named Sage Hill Ranch. Katherine continued teaching, riding to town each day on the mare that was now hers, a wedding gift from Blake. Their first years together were indeed filled with hard work. Blake labored from dawn until dusk, gradually increasing their herd, building corrals and barns, digging wells and irrigation ditches. Katherine balanced her teaching with learning to be a rancher's wife, gardening, preserving, even helping with the cattle when needed. By the spring of 1881, Sage Hill Ranch had doubled in size, with 30 head of cattle and 6 fine horses. Katherine had resigned from teaching that winter when she discovered she was expecting their first child. In June, she gave birth to a healthy son they named William, after Blake's father. As William grew, so did Sage Hill Ranch. By 1885, they had built a larger house with a proper kitchen and 3 bedrooms, anticipating the growth of their family. That fall, their daughter Rebecca was born, named for the woman whose memory had led Blake to build a schoolhouse, and whose boots had given Katherine her first steps toward a new life. In the years that followed, Ordway grew into a prosperous town, with the arrival of the railroad in 1883 bringing new opportunities. Blake and Katherine's ranch flourished, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. They had 2 more children, James in 1888 and Elizabeth in 1890, and their home became known for its hospitality and the books that filled every available shelf. Katherine never forgot those painful days walking barefoot through the desert, nor the man who had found her half dead and given her not just boots, but a new beginning. Sometimes, on the anniversary of their meeting, she and Blake would ride out alone to the plateau where he had proposed, and she would marvel at how fate had led her to this life so different from anything she had imagined. In 1903, for their 25th anniversary, Blake surprised Katherine with a trip to Boston to visit her old home. They traveled by train, a far cry from the stagecoach that had brought her west all those years ago. Standing on the streets of the city where she had grown up, Katherine felt like a visitor from another world. "You ever regret it?" Blake asked as they walked through the public garden. "Staying in Ordway instead of continuing to Prescott? Building a life with a rough cowboy instead of finding some city gentleman?" Katherine looked up at him, still handsome at 55, his dark hair now streaked with silver, his face weathered by years in the sun, but his eyes as clear and steady as ever. She thought of their children, now grown or nearly so, of their ranch, prosperous and thriving, of the life they had built together through hardship and joy. "Never," she said, squeezing his hand. "Not for a single moment." As they stood there, surrounded by the manicured elegance of the garden, so unlike the wild beauty of their Arizona home, Katherine remembered the desperate young woman who had fled a stagecoach attack and walked barefoot through the desert. That woman could never have imagined that her ordeal would lead her to the greatest blessing of her life, a quiet cowboy with storm-gray eyes who had given her boots when she needed them most, and with them, a reason to stay.